Well, it's that time of the year when we all pick which games were the most impactful, memorable, and which were our personal favorites. This is a tradition I've had going for the last 4 years. Even when this channel had 300 subscribers, I still did my Game of the Year announcement. And honestly, it's a good chance for me to self-reflect and look back on all of the games that I've played this year, both reviewing for you guys, making critiques of, and also just games I've played for fun, and to look at them critically once again, but more importantly to compare them and see which games stood out to me the most. Now, quick little word about my methodology here, because I just want to be very, very clear. I'm not selecting Game of the Year based off of total play time, off of the best bang for the buck exclusively. I'm not ranking it based on which I thought was the most polished or refined at launch. All of those are a factor that I do consider with it. For example, if a game was really good, but it launched totally broken and buggy, like a Cyberpunk situation, I'm not going to give that game Game of the Year because the bugs so greatly outweigh the product that was there that was still good, but it's just outweighed by the negative. However, a game like Elden Ring is certainly in contention for Game of the Year despite having major PC problems at launch. Those problems do significantly ding it in that category, which as far as I'm concerned is why it's not a clear front runner and just running away with Game of the Year. You gotta penalize these games for having major technical issues at launch. Otherwise, no studio will take the time to polish. I mean, we've seen it with Callisto Protocol, Gotham Knights, Elden Ring. All of these games are having these problems. So at some point, we have to stand up and be like, come on, enough of this. But one of the staple things that I personally look for in Game of the Year, whether we're looking at indie games, games just for fun, or total Game of the Year for big AAA releases as well, is a game specifically that touched me and impacted me in a way that's going to stick with me for a long time. A game that I'm going to be looking back at for years to come, hopefully positively, and one that I'll be comparing other games to in the future. Now, with that said, I have a handful of nominees this year across 3 different categories that I've chosen to evaluate. For one, major AAA releases. These are the AAAs, quadruple A's, the big games like Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West. That's the category that these games are in. Specifically, you can see in this A tier of development, I've got Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, and Elden Ring as the front runners for this major AAA, huge budget production tier of game release. Beneath that, I've got A Plague Tale Requiem, developed by a smaller studio, Asobo Studio. They've done tremendous work, but only 60 to 70 people worked on this game, and it's absolutely tremendous. Then we have Cult of the Lamb and Stray, which are smaller teams that created these, even arguably indie teams, depending on how you define indie, but they are even still tremendous games. I have mixed feelings about some of them, but I'll explain that as we get to them. And then this other category down here, you see we've got Warhammer Darktide, As Dusk Falls, and The Quarry. These are kind of wild cards. They're games I played in a particular genre that I personally enjoy. I consider this under tier category of awards for me to be the fun factor games, the games that I just played for fun. I didn't make big dedicated videos on them. They're just games that I played up on the couch while relaxing with friends, and I've had a blast with them. So I figured I would put them into their own category, and it's sort of like my wild card award for the year, if that makes sense. But with that said, I think we should start like any gentleman does with the bottom. I tried to say it with a straight face. I couldn't do it. I'm sorry. First up is As Dusk Falls. This is on Game Pass, and it's a bit of a wild card for most people because it has an extremely unique art style. It falls into the same category or genre as The Quarry and other games like Until Dawn, with choose-your-own-adventure elements, clever writing, and decisions that are extremely impactful. Seriously, one choice you might make offhandedly without thinking too hard about it could have major implications for certain characters. Certain characters could die as a result of it. Certain characters could be haunted at the end of the game, emotionally, because of that one choice you made. It's pretty well done. The only reason this isn't a clear winner is because it is a very unique art style. It's not for everybody, but I'll be honest, after we played this for 15-20 minutes, I got completely used to it, and it just kind of turned into a slow moving movie. It blends really, really well after you've played it for 15-20 minutes. I really didn't mind the art style, but my wife really did not like the art style. It bugged her the whole time we were going through it, but you know, it's gonna be to each their own. And yes, I mentioned my wife because Nikki and I played this game sitting on the couch together. There are actual couch co-op functions here and even support for playing the game on a phone. So if you have like 2 phones, you don't even need controllers. You can just sit on the couch and be like answering the prompts of which choice you want to make in a given moment using nothing but your cell phone. So if you have a whole couch full of friends and you want to play a game like this, a choose your own adventure game together, it's a fantastic option for that, and it's pretty fun. The next nominee is The Quarry. This is from the same team that did Until Dawn, and it really does feel like a return to form for them. The dev team has done some smaller projects, specifically in the Dark Pictures anthology series, that some people have tried but have launched to relatively mixed reviews. But The Quarry is the first time they've gone back to a major release that's pretty long and extensive, high production value, and is focused on giving you some jump scares and some psychological horror elements. It feels like a B-grade horror movie with a bunch of, you know, B-grade characters within it, but it's fun, it's lighthearted, and I really enjoyed it. And similar to As Dusk Falls, it's a choose your own adventure kind of game. There's also couch co-op systems, so if you want to play with friends, which Nikki and I actually did, we invited a couple of friends over. Hi, Bruce and Maggie, if you ever see this. And we sat on the couch together, ate pizza, had some margaritas, and played this together. And you basically set it up 4 players and it tells you when to pass the controller to player 2 or to player 4. And it's great. It works wonderfully. And it's just kind of what gaming is all about. Like at the end of the day, it's this community that gets a kick out of video games. And these games that allow you to sit on the couch and play them together, even though they're narrative and gritty and horror focused, I just really, really enjoy it. So again, a fantastic option if you're just looking for something fun to play. And the third nominee for my fun factor category is Warhammer Darktide. I'll be honest, this is a game I did not expect to enjoy. My buddy Caleb pushed me into trying it because he loves Vermintide 2, and those same developers began work on this game a few years ago. And I have to say, it actually is pretty freaking fun. As you fight waves and waves of enemies, you'll be struck by the breathtaking vistas, the high fidelity graphics, and the jaw-dropping music. Seriously, the soundtrack, the sheer graphical fidelity that they're able to pump out is just mind-blowing. Everything about this game is just refined and it feels amazing. If you tried this game in some of those open betas they had like 3-4 months ago, you should go back and seriously consider trying it again. It is so much more polished now than it was back then. It's frankly insane. And I am blown away that with a 3080, I can play the game at 4K. I turn on some DLSS and I can't even tell that it's being upscaled. I get a locked 144 frames a second. Easy peasy. The game looks amazing, sounds amazing, runs amazingly well, and it's fun to boot. This type of game is not going to be for everybody. After all, it's a co-op hack and slash shooter. But if you've expressed even moderate interest in this game over the last 6 months, as they've done preview events and shown it off with all sorts of trailers and gameplay footage, you should definitely give it a try. And honestly, ranking these is a little tricky because it is so subjective, but hey, it's a channel named after me, so I can do whatever I want. All 3 of these games are great, and I'm glad I played them all. What I would say is that As Dusk Falls, while fun, I didn't feel like it had the same replay value or draw as The Quarry. The Quarry, in a lot of ways, pushed me into wanting to see what subsequent playthroughs would actually offer. You know, the thing where you want to go back and push and prod and see, okay, well, if I chose to do this, would that kill this character? Oh, it does. Okay, that's cool. So I'll go and I'll try this. That's one of my favorite things about these kinds of choose your own adventure games. And As Dusk Fall has moments like that, but it's not as satisfying, and I didn't feel myself really wanting to experiment that heavily when compared with The Quarry. The Quarry I've played through like 3 or 4 times now, seen a ton of different branched endings, and I, even now, would happily go back and try it again to see what else is there. And Darktide is tremendous. I am nowhere near done with this game. I still play it almost every night with various friends or by myself. It's just a good, feel-good game. It's tremendous, and I think that there's a long runway on this thing. I don't think I'm going to be done anytime soon. But when I think back to what game had the most impact on me over the course of the year and which game I had the most fun with and the most memories crafted with, honestly, I think I gotta give it to the Quarry. The Quarry, all of the game nights, all of the times that we had friends over to go through it and experiment, we played through it once, and then like the next week, my little sister was staying over, so we booted it up, and she loves these kinds of games, so we went through it again and made different choices to see what it was. I've had so much fun with it, and so I think it's gonna take my top spot for fun factor game of the year. But that brings me to what I would refer to as the indie game of the year. These are games created by smaller studios. They can still be published by big publishing houses like PlayStation or like Xbox, but the dev team specifically is smaller and the budgets are much tighter. For this, my nominees are Stray, Plague Tale Requiem, and Cult of the Lamb. I don't need to tell you too much about Stray. It's a game about a cat in a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk looking world. It's a beautiful game. The world building is top-notch. The sound design is tremendous and utterly remarkable. And on top of all of that, I mean, you get to play as a cat, so that's like +4, right? Let me be clear, I'm a cat guy. I love cats. I have two. Hermione and Finley are upstairs right now. They're regularly in the studio whenever I'm live streaming over on Luke Stevens Live. I'll have linked in the description box below the like button if you want to come hang out with us live whenever, you know, on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays when we stream. But I love cats. I think they're great. But when Stray launched, I made a video review of it where I basically said, hey, if you can get this game for free, you should, especially because it was being offered through PlayStation Plus as a free game through the PlayStation service, and the game's only like 3 hours long. It's very, very small. And you would have thought that I like murdered a cat on camera and then published it everywhere. People lost their minds. I still like Stray. One of my critiques of it is that it's pretty mindless. The puzzles aren't very interesting. The way that they built out the navigation mechanics, specifically with how you run and climb as the cat, is completely mindless. You just hold down a button and point the stick in that direction. I've criticized Assassin's Creed for dumbing down free climbing to that extent in the same way previously. So if I'm gonna be consistent, I have to also call out Stray for dumbing down climbing and navigation so much, especially because that's pretty much all you do in this game. The only gameplay system here is extremely minimal and extremely streamlined. I would argue simplified or overly simplified. But even with that caveat, it's still amazing because the world building, because the meow meow, because everything else is so great. So there we go, just setting the record straight. I like Stray. I enjoyed Stray. I just recommended you get it for free because you could have gotten it for free if you had a PlayStation, which amazingly enough, that's like a controversial thing to say. Like I had people tweeting me, they were like, so you don't want the developers to get money for their game? I was like, I didn't say pirate the game. I said, go get it for free on PlayStation because they're offering it for free. Like, are your ears plugged? Like, what's going on?
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
But our second nominee is A Plague Tale Requiem. This is a sequel to the critically acclaimed A Plague Tale Innocence from a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed the original game, and I was looking forward to this one to take all of the things they laid out in the first game and crank the knobs up to 11. And sure enough, they did. There's some stuff that goes on in A Plague Tale Requiem which is absolutely insane. You've probably heard about the rat tech that they showed off in various trailers, but goodness gracious, some of the stuff they pull off with the rats in this game are just mind-blowing. I haven't seen another game do something on this scale in a very long time, and it's all the more impressive that this is running very well at high frame rates, and it looks tremendous to boot. Now, I played this game for a review on PC. I've heard that on PlayStation 5 and Xbox, it had some technical issues. There were some frame hitches, there were some problems, and that's why this isn't just a clear winner as far as I'm concerned, because the technical issues do need to be called out. My experience with the game was buttery smooth on PC, but once the game launched, it was clear that on console there were mixed reactions. My understanding is all of those problems have been fixed in post-launch patches, but I felt like I should mention it. The story of this game ties in all of the themes from the first game tremendously well, and honestly, it made me tear up and even slightly sob at the end of it. Altogether, it's a remarkable game through and through, and I cannot recommend it enough, but you absolutely should play the first game before you jump into this one. I've also done a full review and a critique of this game on the channel, so if you want to go check those out before you buy the game, go and do that. And the third nominee for Indie Game of the Year for me is Cult of the Lamb. This indie game has you playing as a lamb leading a flock of Well, cult members. It mixes in like simulation base building with this bizarre like action RPG thing, all tied up in a bow that is a roguelite. It's amazing how well it works, honestly, because if I were just reading the description on Steam, I'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't gonna work. But it works very, very well. I've spent a lot of time playing Cult of the Lamb, mostly on my Steam Deck, and I have had a blast while doing it. There's all sorts of decisions you can make as the cult leader, everything from how to treat the dead to how to manage food, and even what kind of sermons that each of your followers should be forced to listen to. And there's some really funny situations you can put yourself in using these systems. You can make it so your cult values dying really positively. So every time a character dies, they get kind of increased faith and they're really excited. And then you can make it so they're all cannibals, so they all try to eat the body. Or you can go and make it so people are just utterly miserable. You tax the crap out of them. They're treated poorly the whole time they're in the cult. But the moment that they die, you can then resurrect them and they become slaves to your cult once again. It's actually kind of crazy how many little combinations you can apply here. And that alone increases replay value and makes it all the more fun to play on subsequent playthroughs, because you're like, oh, last time I ran like a nice cult, this time I'll be like the actual devil incarnate, and you can have a lot of fun with it. Though I will say this game also had some technical issues at launch. On Steam Deck, it would regularly crash maybe once every 35 minutes or so. And on PC, it also had some issues on various builds that I saw online. So again, I understand that most of those issues have been patched out at this point, but we have to be consistent and call it out. And ranking these actually isn't going to be too hard for me. Again, I thought Stray was good, but it was remarkably short. So short that I really struggled to recommend anybody pay actual like cash for it, especially because it's available for free through PlayStation Plus, so I just don't see the need to do it. I think it still is, but I'm not totally sure. I thought the game was fine, but I thought it was certainly hyped up a lot, probably mostly because you play as a cat. And as a cat person, I can say cat people are kind of crazy. Cult of the Lamb is really, really good, but at the end of the day, I love narrative games. I love stories that tie in the themes from the previous entry and tie everything up with a neat bow so you feel like you've experienced the whole game in its entirety. And A Plague Tale Requiem just does that tremendously well. So for me, Plague Tale Requiem is going to take my indie tier game of the year. I am just blown away at everything that they did here, but all three of these games are really solid, and I'm very glad that I played each of them. But now that brings us to the game of the year, the big boy category that everybody's been eagerly waiting for. For this one, the nominees are pretty self-explanatory and you probably see them coming. They are Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok. Real quick, I'm not going to beat around the bush or pretend to be like really, really mysterious with this. I put Horizon Forbidden West on this list kind of out of obligation. Not because I think the game sucks or is horrible or anything, but because it clearly had a ton of money pumped into it. It was technically, on paper, one of the biggest releases of the year. However, again, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I find this game to be utterly lackluster. I did a full critique of it. If you want to see my extended thoughts on Horizon Forbidden West, you can see that in that long critique, which is, of course, on the main channel. However, I can't pretend as though this is anywhere near in the same category as God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring. As far as I'm concerned, these two are far and away the front runners for Game of the Year. Either one of these could win it. Just like in 2018, it was Red Dead 2 and God of War 2018. I just don't think that there's any use in pretending as though this is a serious contender. So I'm just going to let you know right up out of the gate, I'm going to put this down in D tier, even though there's plenty of space for it to sit in B and C. I just really thought that this game played it way too safe. I didn't think it did anything particularly interesting, and there's some design choices, specifically with the campfires, fast travel, and navigation, that are utterly mind-blowing in terms of their stupidity. Again, if you want to hear my extended thoughts, go check out the critique. I explain in detail all of the little tidbits surrounding Horizon Forbidden West, its open world design, and all of the other little details, because truly, there are so many little things that they did in Forbidden West that are not, in my opinion, I guess, I could argue this, and that's what I do in the critique, but I don't think they're even up for like negotiation as to, oh, well, that's an interesting design choice. I think maybe it could be good, it could be bad. I think objectively we can argue these design choices were stupid and I don't know what they're doing. The grind involved in upgrading equipment alone is enough to make this game get dinged like 2 to 3 points. It's just so underwhelming across the board, which is a bummer because it was supposed to be the big sequel that took the foundation laid by Horizon Zero Dawn and just cranked all the knobs up to 10 and 11 and 15, rip the knob off. They needed to do something like that, and instead they brought a game that just lands flat. And I think you're seeing that now. I mean, in all of the discussions at the end of this year, the only games anybody's really talking about are Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. And I think it's just because Horizon Forbidden West, while solid and, definitely a game you should get on sale for like 30, 40 bucks, I don't think it's in the same stratosphere as God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring. So, yeah. Oh boy, I kind of started rambling there. I'm a little lightheaded. With that being said, the two front runners are God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring. Both of these games are tremendous, but let's go through my overarching thoughts on each real quick. First of all, Elden Ring. I mean, what can I possibly say about Elden Ring that hasn't already been said? The game is huge, it is impressive, it is beautiful, it is fun, and there are so many boss fights here that an old school fan of the FromSoft style of game design is going to be creaming in their pants at every corner. A lot of us just expected Dark Souls 3, but in an open world, and while that certainly is a good broad strokes definition of what Elden Ring brings to the table, it is so much more than that. The design of the world, the design of the enemies, and the ambiance, the music, everything is top notch. I don't know how, but somehow they managed to pull this off. Now, because I'm not a fanboy of any franchise or game, I'm going to call out the good and the bad and let you know what I think. In the case of Elden Ring, we just have to be completely clear and honest. There were major technical issues on the PC port at launch. I mean, a lot of people were even saying the best place to play Elden Ring, a cross-generational and cross-platform game, was on the PS4 Pro. That is a problem. I mean, if God of War Ragnarok launched exclusive to PlayStation and the best and most stable version of it was on like the PS4 Slim, that would be a problem, and we would tease the crap out of them for that. But for some reason, when it comes to Elden Ring, everybody is supposed to just shut up and pretend like it's not an actual problem. But it is. Anytime a developer or publisher releases a game that they charge you 60 or 70 bucks for, and it releases in a state where it's so hitchy and stuttery that it's borderline unplayable, I consider that to be a major issue. Whether it's Gotham Knights, the Callisto Protocol, or Elden Ring, you have to call it out. Otherwise, it's gonna keep happening and it will get worse. I mean, just look at like the latest Pokemon game as a perfect example of what happens when your community and your customer base just doesn't care about the performance issues on a major release. They don't care. They broke all of the sales records, like all of them. Is there a sales record? Yes, they broke it with that game. Even though it's broken at launch, they used the broken thing to break the sales record. Let me be clear, it does not disqualify Elden Ring for consideration for Game of the Year. Obviously, it's the front runner with God of War Ragnarok, but I just think it's important for us to note that when this game came out, despite being utterly tremendous in almost every facet of its design, the technical issues were a big problem. I tried playing Elden Ring on PC, live streaming it, and it was so stuttery that I had to stop playing, download it on the PS5, and then start playing it on the PS5 from there. Because it was so much better, I would rather lose the 2 to 3 hours of progress on PC, try to return that through Steam, and then get it on PS5. But more specifically, get it on PS5, download the PS4 version of the game, and then run that through the backwards compatibility layer within PlayStation. Somehow that was the most stable version of the game, but you know what? I guess it doesn't matter. It's Elden Ring, right? But setting that aside and being fair, they did patch this pretty quickly to get rid of the stuttering as far as I understand it. It took about a week and a half and then they were able to fix it. They spent another 2 to 3 weeks balancing different builds and bosses. Famously, they broke the Melania fight. You guys might actually see my Melania statue from the Elden Ring Collector's Edition up in the glass cabinet there. They broke her boss fight and made it so she was basically unbeatable while that patch was live, which is just really, really funny to me because she has a healing effect where whenever she lands an attack, she heals a little. They accidentally patched it and made it so every time she attempts an attack, she would heal. And she attacks in like flutters. So she would get down to like a quarter health and then she would do a flutter of attacks and go back up to half health. and people were like losing their minds. And it wasn't because they just needed to get good. It's because the game was broken and they accidentally broke it in a patch. So all of those problems caused some instability at launch, but the game itself, now that the dust has settled, is tremendous. And I spent so much time in this game. I spent in my first playthrough like 120, 150 hours, somewhere between there. I loved this game. I still love this game. I can't wait to like avoid playing it for a year or two and then go back and try it again and see what it's like with fresh eyes. And that's something that doesn't happen very often in gaming. You know, people ask, like, what's the one game that you wish you could just wipe your memory of and experience again for the first time? Usually people will throw out like Breath of the Wild, Red Dead 2, The Witcher 3, Skyrim. And I think Elden Ring has definitely earned its place in that same category of amazing games, because if I could wipe my memory and start again and experience it all fresh, I certainly would, because the game really is that good. But speaking of other amazing games, God of War Ragnarok. Little plug here, we are actually working on the critique for God of War Ragnarok. It's going to release in the next like 3 to 4 days from when this video launches. So make sure to subscribe and ring the bell for that, because it's going to be like a 3 to 5 hour video. So I would really appreciate if you guys go watch that, so it doesn't turn out that I wasted my time, you know, for like weeks of work. God of War Ragnarok is the sequel to the reboot of the franchise we saw in 2018. Everything about this game is epic. They took all of the expectations people had coming off of the last game and subverted those expectations. Now, sometimes subversion of expectations can be a good or bad thing. In this case, they would take an expectation, like say you think, okay, I'm gonna do X. If X happens in Ragnarok, that would be cool. They took that and then they said, okay, so X would be cool? Okay. Let's give them 15 X's. And then they just blow you away. And they do that pretty much at every step of the path that you go on through Ragnarok. I seriously mean it when I say that every time I thought in my mind, it would be cool if this happened, or it would be cool if we were able to do that with this character. Every time I thought that, we did it, and then some. And then there was some twist that made it even better than I expected. And that is, in and of itself, something very, very rare, where a game just comes along and blows you away. Furthermore, the game launched very, very polished. I got the collector's edition of this game, and in the box, it had a sticker, a quality assurance sticker on the box that said when it was packaged. It was packaged December of 2021, and it had a physical like game disc and box inside of it. And so like this game had been sitting in a warehouse for a year, just hanging out, waiting for when Sony decided it was ready to go. And that should tell you just how refined and polished this game really is. They effectively, as far as I can tell, spent a full year to just work on refinements, and it shows. There's a ton of stuff to say about Ragnarok. A lot of it is spoiler related, so definitely be wary of the comments if you have not played the game yet. But if you want to hear my extended thoughts on this, again, I'll be posting a massive critique in the next few days where I will outline all of my thoughts in excruciating detail. All told, the game is utterly tremendous, and I cannot praise it highly enough. It really is that good. Now, like I said, these are the two clear frontrunners for Game of the Year. Either one of these could win, and I think it would be perfectly justified. I wouldn't throw a fit if either one of these took it. If I could give it to both, I would give it to both. But frankly, it's just a matter of personal opinion. If you prioritize gameplay first and foremost, Elden Ring is probably going to take it, because it offers well over 100 hours of not just like combat and boss fights and stuff, but also PvP gameplay, subsequent playthroughs on like New Game Plus, all sorts of things that you can go through in Elden Ring to increase your knowledge and experience with the game. And every single one of them is utterly amazing. Like, it just blows my mind every time I go back into Elden Ring. It's just so good. And God of War Ragnarok offers a very impressive narrative, cinematic, and epic adventure that at every turn subverts expectations in an amazing way. In a lot of ways, this really does just come down to gameplay versus story. If you're a narrative player, you're probably going to prefer Ragnarok. If you are a gameplay-oriented player, you're probably going to end up giving it to Elden Ring. But you know what? At the end of the day, I have to give my top slot to one of them. And for me, it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this video. And those are the core considerations I make when evaluating which game should get Game of the Year. Because it's not as simple as just which game me like most or which game me have most hours in. It's a little more nuanced than that. And in this case, what it comes down to and what my chief consideration is what game am I going to be comparing every other game to for the next like 5 years? Which game would I rather just wipe my memory and experience again for the first time? And which game do I think will have the biggest and most long-lasting impact on the industry? Which game is going to command the most clones and attempts to copy it from EA and Ubisoft? And for that, I mean, I don't think there's any way that you could say that the game that does all of that and does it tremendously well is Elden Ring. So I'm gonna give Elden Ring my Game of the Year for 2022. It could easily have gone to Ragnarok. It's just that when I think of which games hit me the most hard this year, which games are going to stick with me the longest, and which games are going to certainly command the most, let's say, attempted duplications, it's going to be Elden Ring. This is going to be the standard bearer for the next few years, and it would not surprise me if in like a year and a half, 2 years, we start to see all sorts of EA and Ubisoft and indie studios trying to rip it off in various ways because it's just that good. And then we have Horizon Forbidden West. We'll just put you down there. I swear, I'm gonna have some Sony ponies really upset with me in the comments. I don't care, bring it on, dude. But I think that's gonna do it for me. I am very pleased with this year in gaming. It feels like we got some amazing titles and a lot of surprises as well. Games we thought were gonna be great that ended up being kind of meh. Probably the chief among them being like the Callisto Protocol. I was super pumped for that, and it came out and it was like, okay, well, it's certainly one of the games of the year. You know, it's just like, okay, well, there's that. But to be honest, next year is probably only going to be better. There's a ton of games coming out next year. Specifically in like February, there's a huge slot of games. We have Starfield coming next year. It's going to be a very, very busy 2023 for all gamers, whether you're reviewers or just players. It's going to be very, very busy because there's a lot of really interesting stuff coming out, and I cannot wait to see what is on the table. And before anybody asks, my most anticipated game next year is Hogwarts Legacy. I don't even need to do like a tier list for that because without a doubt, it's Hogwarts Legacy. Like, yeah, I'm sure Starfield will be interesting, but like I'm not super pumped on them ever since 76. So I'm just not that thrilled about it. I'm gonna wait for reviews basically, but Hogwarts Legacy, like, I'm actually kind of pumped for that. I mean, I have the freaking Hogwarts Lego castle behind me. Of course, I'm a Lego nerd. I love Harry Potter as well. And soon I'll be getting a chance to actually play through a digital form of Hogwarts. Like, who doesn't want to do that? It's gonna be great. But I want to hear what your picks for Game of the Year were in the comment section below. I'll be looking through those to see if there's any surprises or any games I wasn't aware of that are also great. So let me know what you think down below. Of course, we have our Discord linked in the link tree below as well if you want to join us over there. We live stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday over on Luke Stevens Alive. And I am working, of course, as I said, on that big critique of God of War Ragnarok, which will be out in the days following this video. So if it's a few days after that, go watch the video. If it's not, subscribe so you get notified of when that video goes up. And of course, I also have a really exciting announcement about merchandise that we've been working on for like a year and a half that I will be dropping during that God of War Ragnarok review critique thing. So buckle up for that. But with that, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna prep for the Game Awards that are taking place in like 3 hours to 2 hours. So I will see you guys over there. We'll be live streaming it. You won't see this until the day after, but I'm gonna go do that. Thanks for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next video. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.